Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the second of our 4 musical theatre masterclasses. First of all, I must thank my producers this evening, Jake and Glenn, for doing all the tech. And a special welcome not only to EYT, but also to our partners. There's the Theatre Acting Club from Bucharest, the Palace Theatre Youth Theatre from Redditch, the Caerphilly Youth Theatre, the AATG from The Hague, and as the MC sings in cabaret this evening, I am your host. So it's very good to be here. And we are going to focus this evening on our professional guest this evening, Rosie Ashe. Now, I'll have a lot more to say about Rosie and to Rosie in a little bit, but I just want to give you a little bit of a taste of Rosie's extraordinary voice. So we're going to play a little clip from a show that Rosie did a few years ago. She played Felicia in the musical version of The Witches of Eastwick. Well, that was the extraordinary Dirty Laundry from the musical version of Witches of Eastwick. It was a fantastic show. It ran at the Theatre Audrey Lane, perhaps the most beautiful theatre in London, for a year, and then transferred to the Prince of Wales Theatre to continue its run some years ago now. So before we start, I just want to remind you, or perhaps remind your parents, that we are doing these hopefully in aid of the charity Acting for Others. Now, as you will be well aware, the theatre industry in Britain and in fact around the world is absolutely on its knees because of the pandemic. The theatre industry is always very good at supporting charities for absolutely every good cause known to man, but this time the theatre industry actually needs some help. Now, I know times are very tough for lots of people, and if you can't, you can't. But if you can make a contribution, you can either Google Acting for Others, or in fact, I think there's a donation box on your screen. So if you can, that would be much appreciated. So welcome. Last week, you listened to Liz Robertson talking about her career and particularly about My Fair Lady. And I said that My Fair Lady, which has been called the perfect musical, came in the middle, really, or towards the end of what's known as the golden age of musical theatre, running from about 1928 Showboat to, say, for argument's sake, 1960, which was the year in which The Sound of Music and Camelot opened. And in some ways, those mark the end of the golden age of musical theatre. So why does that mark the end of something? Well, it was principally because of the beginning of the rise of pop music being different from show music. You will find this hard to believe, but in the golden age, the most popular songs in the charts were actually songs from musicals. Even in 1965, 1966, and 1968, you would perhaps think that the top-selling album would have been a Beatles album, but it wasn't. The top-selling album for those 3 years was the cast recording of The Sound of Music with Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer, who sadly died earlier this week. But of course, as pop music began to develop, musical theatre was to a certain extent left a little bit high and dry until a phenomenon came along, a phenomenon known as Andrew Lloyd Webber. And Andrew Lloyd Webber, who had two passions, a passion for pop music, but also a passion for musical theatre. And starting very small, he wrote a show which many of you may have done called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Again, any of these things I mentioned that you don't know, just Google them, look them up. But then he wrote a smasher-rooney hit called Jesus Christ Superstar. And Jesus Christ Superstar was a kind, well, he called it a pop opera. It was really a musical, but it was a musical heavily influenced by pop. And indeed, the album, Jesus Christ Superstar, was an enormous hit. And Andrew Lloyd Webber, along with another writer called Stephen Sondheim, that we won't particularly talk about tonight, but redefined musical theatre. And Andrew Lloyd Webber has had an extraordinary career. After Jesus Christ Superstar, he wrote the show Evita. And Evita had an enormous long run and has been revived many, many times since. He then topped even that with a production of a show called Cats. And Cats became a worldwide phenomenon. Cats was a show that you could do in any language. It was a show that, although it had great people in it, the title alone took it around the world. And the genius of his partner in that was the producer, Cameron Mackintosh. Because in the golden age, musicals would play on Broadway and in the West End, and they might tour a little bit around America, a little bit around the UK. But after Cameron came along, he realized that you could, in fact, tour these productions and take these productions all over the world. And so musical theatre became a worldwide phenomenon. And after Cats, Andrew wrote a show called Phantom of the Opera. It was based on the novel Phantom of the Opera. And it went on to become, until 2014, when it was overtaken by The Lion King, it became the most successful entertainment product of all time. Phantom of the Opera has made a profit in excess of $6 billion. An extraordinary piece of entertainment. My special guest this evening was in the original production of Phantom of the Opera at Her Majesty's Theatre, where it has been running for over 30 years, and it was still running until it was closed, of course, like everything else, by the pandemic. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Rosie Ashe. Rosie, you turn your camera on. There you are, and you're unmuted. Darling, it's lovely to see you. I was talking to Liz last week, and we couldn't remember how we met, but I do remember how you and I met. It was in the most unsalubrious surroundings of the New London Theatre. We were at the Stage, which is the trade newspaper's Christmas party. And if you remember, it was so crowded, we got trapped in a corner of that rather unlovely theatre. And we couldn't get out, but we had a bottle of champagne and we just spent the whole afternoon demolishing the bottle and putting the theatre to rights. So that's how we met. So it's lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and hello to everybody.
Yes. So if you have questions, we've got a shed load of questions, Rosie, that have been sent in, but we're going to have some live ones in a bit first. But I just really want to talk to you first about, so you played Carlotta in the very first cast of Phantom. Tell us a bit about what it was like rehearsing it. Did you know it was going to be a smash hit? Just tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, no, you never know whether a show's going to be a smash hit or anything. Right up until opening night, we didn't have any idea. You could still buy seats. I mean, it was quite well sold out. Quite well sold, but there were still seats available. It was a really nice job for me personally, because having trained as an opera singer and done opera and then moved into musicals, it's where the two met. And rehearsals, we rehearsed in the summer because it was put back because they recast the Phantom. That Michael Crawford came on board quite late, as you probably know. It was originally going to be Steve Harley. Then they changed their mind.
Who did the single, didn't he, with
yes,
Sarah Brightman?
He was a pop singer, Steve Harley. He was in a group called Cockney Rebel, and he recorded the Phantom of the Opera single with Sarah Brightman. But my understanding is that the management got a bit worried whether he would be able to sustain 8 performances a week, which is, a hard thing to do for anybody, and he's a pop singer. So they decided to pay him off and let him go. Now that meant that the whole, and then it got called on Michael Crawford to take over. He wasn't available, so the whole thing was put back by, I think, 3 months. We started rehearsing in the summer. Hal Prince was absolutely wonderful. My big memory is on the first day of rehearsals, he had a model of the set and he went through it scene by scene and he knew exactly what he was doing. He'd worked everything out in advance and it didn't really change. There were two things that got cut. One was they were going to have two real doves flying about, sort of love doves, as it were, and they decided to cut those. And
probably
also,
a wise decision.
Yeah, and I think they were going to have rats as well. Not real rats, but I think they were going to have electronic rats at one point. And also, Michael Crawford wanted to wear an opaque contact lens in the eye that didn't have the mask on. And then he quickly realized, by about the third row of the stalls, it wouldn't register. So that was that. I'm not sure where the half mask came from. That's the interesting thing, because if you look at the poster, it's a full mask.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know when that came about.
I mean, for the actor playing the Phantom, it's a terrible thing because the makeup takes about 2 hours, doesn't it, to put on, and half an hour to take
well, they
off.
got it much shorter now. It used to take much longer. I mean, Michael Crawford was a perfectionist anyway. He would be in the theatre in the morning. It used to take about 4 hours, I think. They got it much quicker now, down to fine art, but it took for ages and ages. And actually, the Phantom part is quite a solitary part, really.
Yes.
Because he's not on stage for that long, actually, and some of the time he's up in the sort of the angel that hangs down, and he's only ever on stage with Raoul and Christine. So we never saw him really, unless I popped into the dressing room to say hello. But going back to the rehearsals, yeah, I mean, Hal he'd worked everything out and interestingly, I was in New York this time last year, and I went to an exhibition of Hal Prince at the Lincoln Center Library, and there was some his original notes of the production and his assistant Ruthie, and it was all planned. Yeah, so it was actually a very good, easy rehearsal period because he'd worked everything out. Of course, new music was coming in all the time. I mean, one of the late pieces of music that came in quite late on was Masquerade.
Really?
Yeah, that was quite a late edition. Yes.
So that, just for anyone who doesn't know Phantom, again, go away, get on Spotify, listen to it. But Masquerade actually opens Act 2, doesn't it?
Yeah. So that was a late edition, as it were.
And your number, Prima Donna, as you say, you play an opera singer in the show, and obviously you will talk a little bit more about your training in a moment. But it's a big sing. It's a big sing.
Yeah, part of that is partly my fault as well, because Andrew was very good. Okay, so this is the story. He told me I would have my own song, okay? And I remember bumping into him, because I got the part, and I remember bumping into him somewhere before we started rehearsals, and he was with Sarah, and he said, "I've written you a song." She's furious. So I was really excited, and on the first day of rehearsals, I opened up the score, and I'm going through it, and I think, where's my song? And I only had a bit of a song. And I said, oh, I don't have a song. So I don't know what happened about that, why I didn't have a whole song to myself. But what he did do to make up for it was put in extra stuff in Prima Donna, and also allow me, via my coach, I had a vocal coach called Gerald Moore. We sort of fiddled about with some of the music, my music, and there's one very, very high note in Prima Donna, a top E in what they call E and out, which I put in because I could.
But you could.
Because I could 8 times a week.
Yes.
And all the poor sopranos who followed in my footsteps have had to sing. They made a thing about it that you had to have that note. And actually, it could have been what they call an alternate note. It was just something I could do. I had a facility to do it.
There's the famous story, of course, that Julie Andrews, that note at the end of Do, Re, Mi, because, of course, the score was written for Mary Martin, who had a very tiny range. And when they were rehearsing the film, Julie Andrews apparently said, oh, by the way, I can do this, and did it. And they went, yeah, we'll have a bit of that. So that's why there's that extraordinary top note, because she could.
That's the same sort of thing. Yeah, I didn't think
so. You've altered the score of an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. Wow, that's...
Oh, yes. I even wrote it in because they came round with the score before they printed it, and I had to write my bits and pieces in. Yeah.
Wow. So where did you train, Rosie? And what was your first break as it were?
I trained at the Royal Academy of Music,
Wow.
which is one of the top conservatoires in the country. And then I did 4 years there. And then I went to London Opera Centre, as it was called then. It's now the Opera Studio, to do 2 more years after that. And my big break, well, I got a job in an opera chorus when I started out in Leeds. It's now called Opera North. It was
Opera
called
North,
English
yeah.
National Opera North. And I was in the chorus, and they dangled the carrot. If you joined the chorus, they would give you small parts. So I got to play quite a few small parts. I was always interested in acting and sort of character parts as well, interesting parts. And I loved being on stage. And then the classic thing happened. There's a famous opera called The Magic Flute by Mozart, which has a very, very high part in it called The Queen of the Night.
Yes.
Very, very stratispherically high. And I went to the management and said, could I understudy this part, please? So they gave me the understudy. And guess what? I had to go on 3 times.
Wow.
The person playing it was sick, and I went on and played it 3 times. Now, because in those days, this is in the 80s, early 80s, there were no mobile phones or computers or anything like that then. And
I know you won't believe that, but there was a world before mobile
there was
phones.
a world. I couldn't just. I had to try and get an agent to come and see me from London, but it was very difficult because you couldn't let anybody. With opera, you can cancel on the day of the performance by 1 o'clock. So I didn't know till 1 o'clock on each
Rosie,
performance.
can I just interrupt for a second, because the question's just come in.
Oh, sorry.
What is an understudy? So it's a really good question. We all know. So could you just explain what is an understudy?
Okay, so when you see somebody in a show, be it a play or a musical, but we're talking about musicals today. Musicals do eight performances a week usually. So what happens if somebody is sick or they have an accident and they can't go on? They have to have somebody to go on in their place. And that person who has learnt the part and is waiting to go on is called an understudy. And in West End shows, we have 2 understudies, or they're also known as covers, first cover and second cover, because sometimes you could have a situation where the main person playing the part is ill, and then their first cover or understudy is ill. So they might need a second understudy. Usually the understudies are in the chorus, or what they call the ensemble of the show.
Or swings, yeah. There was a story, I think it was not last summer, because nothing happened last summer, of course, but the summer before, I think it was a performance of Mamma Mia had to be cancelled because the principal was off and both covers were off and they literally couldn't do the show.
Yeah.
And they cancelled the matinee, and then they realised there was somebody in 42nd Street just up the road who'd done Mamma Mia. So she came out of that, a swing covered that, and she went down to the Novello and did the performance of Mamma Mia. So it was a really good question, but I interrupted you. So go back.
No. So what happened was I rang an agent and he said, I can't come to see you. It's too short notice. I can't come to see you. But if you sing The Queen of the Night in the Magic Flute, you obviously have a very high voice. Do you know a song called Glitter and Be Gay, which is from a musical called Candide by Leonard Bernstein?
Yes.
And I said, yes, I do. He said, would you like to audition? There's a production happening in the Edinburgh Festival. This is 1981. So I said, yes, please. So I came down to London from Leeds is north, is in Yorkshire, for those who don't know where it is. Came down to London, did an audition, went back, got called back for another audition and was offered the part. So I left my full-time, safe chorus job in an opera company with paid holidays to start my self-employed freelance life and played that role in Edinburgh. That's how it started. That was my big break. Yeah.
And it's a beautiful song, Glitter and Be Gay. So again, Spotify and listen to it, because it's a wonderful, wonderful song. Did you always want to perform? Was that always your dream? I
always wanted to sing. My mother was a pianist. I always wanted to sing, and started having singing lessons when I was 11. And I can remember watching Maria Callas on television when I was, I don't know, about 8. And she was singing an operatic aria called O mio babbino caro. I didn't know what it was then. I just thought it was a lovely song, and she was a beautiful lady in a nice dress. And I started singing. I remember my mother getting me to sing in a bucket, because to see if I could be a pop singer. I don't know why, when I was a very kid. But I started having lessons when I was 11.
Last week, I found out that Liz did a stint in a pop group, which I had no idea about. You mentioned your agent, and one of the questions we've had is it important to have an agent, and how do you go about getting one?
Yes, of course, it's very, very important to have an agent. Well, the best way to get one normally, if you're training and you're at college, you're doing a musical theatre course, they'll have what they call a showcase at the end of your training year, which usually, be it a 1-year course or a 2-year or 3-year course. It's better to do a 3-year course really to get a full training, and agents are invited to that, and you will hopefully get an agent there. It is very important to get an agent because they know all the casting directors. They get all what they call the submissions. They're able to put you up for things and talk to people, and also negotiate fees on your behalf.
Yes, it's really, I mean, you do hear stories of people who don't have agents, but I think, and it was interesting, it's very much what Liz was saying last week, you really do need an agent because they know the industry inside out. For some reason, I used to get invited to a lot of the showcases. They always seem to be at the Criterion. I don't know why, but of course none of that is happening this year, which is
the other thing is that actors and performers are notoriously bad negotiators. They're notoriously bad business people. So yes. We're so thrilled to be asked, "Oh, you offered a job." You go, "Oh, thank you so much."
Please.
and then they'll say, "Well, how much do you want?" And you go, and that's why you need somebody to do that for you. We're hopeless.
Yes. This came up with Liz last week, and it was really interesting. Somebody asked that the youth theatre teachers say, our teachers say, always bring a pencil to rehearsal, never be late. So what would be your golden rules for theatre?
Well, I have 2 massive tips. The 2 big tips I always give are always be on time and keep your mouth shut. Okay. First of all, you have to be on time. You have to. There's no excuse. You can't. And it's no use moaning. I have a long journey. Blah blah. Allow extra time. Doesn't matter if you get there early, go and get a coffee, but be on time, because it holds everything up, because rehearsals are done on a tight schedule, and it's very expensive to rehearse. So that's the most important thing. Also be on time for auditions. It won't be tolerated, bad punctuality.
I think I'm right. It certainly used to be the case. I don't know if it's still true that you can actually be fired for not being in for the half. So for those who don't know, the half is called 35 minutes before the curtain rises, and that's the point at which you must be in the theatre. Now, if you've got a big makeup job, we were talking about the Phantom, you will obviously be there much, much earlier than that. But that is the absolute last moment to which you can arrive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the half stands for the half hour, but misleadingly, it's 35 minutes.
Yes.
There's half hour, which is 35 minutes. Then there's the quarter, which is 20 minutes. Then there's the 5 minute, which is 10 minutes. Then there's beginners, which is 5 minutes. But because if they called beginners when the show was due to start, people wouldn't be there. See what I mean?
You have to bear in mind, of course, that a lot of the big West End theatres, because a lot of them are on quite small sites, there are often flights and flights and flights of stairs. So if you've got, if the stage manager called beginners when he wanted the show, or she wanted the show to start, by the time everyone had got down the stairs, you'd be late. So everything is 5 minutes ahead of when it should be, so that so the last thing the stage manager does before he or she starts the show is glance around to make sure you've actually got your cast, because if you haven't, you've got a problem.
And as to taking a pencil to rehearsals, well, yeah, I mean, I think that's right. Always have a notebook, a pen or a pencil, whatever. Don't make notes on your phone. Phone shouldn't be allowed out at rehearsal. They should be put away. They should be on silent. And I've caught students say, I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Oh, I'm writing this on my phone." I said, "No, because you can use that as an excuse. How do I know you're writing stuff on your phone and you're not having a look at something else, Facebook or something?" Have a notebook, take notes, write notes. And when the reason I say keep your mouth shut is because when take direction, and when a director gives you notes about your performance, take them. Be grown up, take them. Don't argue them. Don't say, if he said, "Well, I wasn't happy you didn't do this," and say, "Oh no, well, yeah, but and don't come up with excuses. Nobody's interested. You're there to learn."
It's very interesting because Liz last week was saying, "Oh, take your phone because sometimes you can record." I mean, we were talking about Trevor Nunn's famous lectures before rehearsal start, and she said, "You know, you could never write all that down, so you have to balance that."
Well, you
guys,
can use your phone if you're learning music. I should qualify that. For learning music, yes. I mean, we all in the old days we used to use cassette players and record.
Yes, we did.
Now you can use your voice recording on your phone, but you know. I think it's a good idea because most of the time I know that things are very digital these days, but not everybody can afford some sort of digital program where they can write on it. That may happen in the next few years. I still prefer a hard copy.
Well, I must admit, when I'm a bit of a dinosaur. When I'm stage managing, I still use an old-fashioned book, you know, because I know will work. I don't know that the tech.
I still think it's quicker, and I've used. I was doing a recording session once, and I used music on my tablet that I downloaded, and I got in a panic because I needed to go back on something I couldn't get back quick enough, and also you know, I like to mark stuff, but you know, I am a bit of a dinosaur too. But
it's quite fascinating. We did a lot of digital over Christmas at St. Paul's, and it was quite interesting to see bands arrive now without, you know, with just their tablet instead of having music.
Yeah,
I mean, it's good for the planet in that sense, of course. One, you know, it's a good thing. But let's talk a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about auditions. How do you prepare for an audition? What's the best way of getting ready for an audition? How do you deal with an audition? And again, as Liz was saying, you know, however big a star you are, you still audition.
Oh, you never stop. You never stop auditioning. Well, first of all, look at what you're asked to do. Normally, at a first audition, you might just be asked to sing a song of your own choice, for example. And so make sure it's something you know inside out, backwards. And are really confident, but don't just take one song. Take at least 3, if not half a dozen. Take what we call your portfolio. Take different choices because they might hear one song and say, "What else have you got?" Try not to take something that's too well known because you know, try to be a bit different because you say it's you've only got a few minutes to make your mark. Get up in good time. Make sure you are totally warmed up. Really warmed up and ready to go, be on time. If you have dialogue or material to look at, really work hard on that. These days, if you get sent music from a show, you get sent a guide track to sing to and everything. They do help you a lot. So make sure you do as much work on that as possible. So preparation is the key, really. And when you go in for an audition and they want you to sing, go over to the pianist and chat with them about setting the tempo of what you're going to sing. Take your time. You don't have to rush because it's your audition. It's your time. Make sure the pianist knows exactly what you're going to do. Make sure the music is all stuck together so it opens out like a book. Don't give him all, you know, separate pages. That's no good. That's another bit of preparation. And take your time and just know that you nothing's going to go wrong because you're well prepared and you'll remember every line and know what you're doing. And also, I would say, if the panel's in front of you, don't look directly at a panel. Look above their heads as if you're on a stage. Look above them. If you're singing something that's just got the odd funny line in where you'd like to direct something at the panel, you could direct the odd line at them, but basically not. You forget they're there, and it's imagine you're on a stage and looking up.
Thank you. That's really, really useful thoughts there. And also, very interesting you're saying, and you can start preparing this at any point, have a portfolio of songs.
Oh, absolutely. And nowadays, you know, you've got the world as your oyster. You know, there are loads of things. You can hear anything so much on YouTube and stuff. And there are services, you know, if you can't get hold of the sheet music of something, you know, you can go onto somewhere like Fiverr, that app where you can get people to write things out for you quite cheaply, you know, transcribe things if you send them a recording or something. Yes, but definitely have a choice. You need, you know, you need an up-tempo song, a pop song, or maybe a rock song, a comedy song, a legit, what they call a legit song, you know, pre-1950s. You need a whole wealth of material because you never know what you're going to be asked to do, and even have something unaccompanied as well.
Oh, wow, really? Wow.
Yeah.
And the sense in which that you might, I think it's really important that you said don't choose something too well known, because nobody wants to sit through another version of Memory, do they? You know,
Nobody wants to hear empty chairs at empty tables or Memory, or I'm afraid nobody really wants to hear stuff from Les Mis or Phantom.
or Wicked.
Sing that for your own pleasure, but try and be a bit clever. The other very important thing to remember is sing a song that you can imagine yourself playing that role, a song that belongs to a role you imagine. So, for example, if you're 15 years old, don't go and sing "Send in the Clowns" just because you think it's a pretty song, you like it. "Send in the Clowns" is written for a much more mature person in the show. So don't just pick a song because you like the song. Look at the show, look at the context of the show, who sings it, where it comes in the show. The other thing you should know is who wrote the song, because you might be asked, particularly if you're auditioning for a music theatre course, you will well, I've sat on audition panels many times, saying, well, who wrote this? I mean, somebody once came in and sang, said, "I'd like to sing, 'Oh, What a Beautiful Morning.'" I said, "What show is that from?" He said, and he went, "Oklahoma." And I said, "Yeah, and who wrote Oklahoma?" And he thought for a minute and he said, "Cameron Mackintosh."
Well, Cameron's multi-talented, but not that talented.
Do pay respect to the composers and lyricists, at least know.
And there's no excuse nowadays. It's all on Wikipedia. It's all out there. You can.
It takes seconds. It takes seconds to find out. You've got all the information at your fingertips. It's fantastic. Do your preparation. Do your homework, and look at the story of the show. And dramatically where the piece comes, if you're taking a song out of context, you can do whatever you like with it, but still in your head know where it comes in the show.
You've had an extraordinary career. We've talked a little bit about Phantom. You played Miss Andrew in Mary Poppins. We heard you as Felicia, and you were magnificently horrible as Felicia in Witches of Eastwick. All of those shows ran a very long time. Now, people will obviously, you don't stay in a show for 30 years like Phantom has run, but you do quite long runs in the West End. What's it like? How do you stay fresh in a long run if you're doing 8 times a week? And we talk, Liz, a lot about the stress that places on your voice and your body to do 8 times a week, unlike opera singers who only do 2 or 3 a week. But particularly, it'd be interesting to get your views on staying fresh in a long run.
Well, you have to be very good to yourself. You have to look after yourself. You have to watch your diet and take exercise and rest up as well. I mean, Phantom was a huge thing to do 8 times a week. I used to have a sleep in the afternoon before I went in to do Phantom.
That's exactly what Liz said. Have a sleep in the afternoon. When she was doing My Fair Lady, she said had to.
Because it was exhausting. I used to have a singing lesson once a week. I didn't used to do very much, to be honest, because it is an exhausting thing. And the thing about it is you have to remember, there can be times on a Saturday night when you're thinking, oh, how am I going to get through this again? And what I always think to myself is everybody in the audience is paid. There are people who've never seen this before. You are doing a job. You're actually only on stage for a few hours. Think about poor people who have to, be on their feet all day working in a shop or sitting at a computer all day long. Come on. I mean, it is hard repeating the same thing, trying to keep the standard up. But that's what you have to bear in mind. People are seeing this and they haven't seen it before. It might be feel old and tired to you, but it's fresh to them.
Well, it's interesting. There's a wonderful, fascinating Aida line. I love Fascinating Aida. I think they're such a funny comedy group. And Adele at one point says, it doesn't matter if they're unsympathetic and heartless. They've paid, and you are paid to do this, and I think
exactly. And I never understand why people moan. You're paid to do it. It's the best job in the world. It is the best job in the world, doing something that you love. If you love performing, love singing, and you're going on a stage and you're dressed up as you're playing somebody else into a big audience. There's nothing. The high of it is incredible. The buzz of it is fantastic.
Yes.
But you just be good to yourself. And obviously, I think I didn't use, particularly if it was a big singing role, I wouldn't go out much after the show, apart from a Saturday night when I would really let rip. And actually, I do remember when I was in a show one Saturday night, I thought, I went out and had quite a lot to drink because it was the end of the week. And I thought, day off. And on the Sunday morning, I was lying in bed and I got this phone call, the phone rang. I went, hello. And they said, this is the Royal Festival Hall here. We're doing operatic concert tonight and our soprano's sick. Would you be able to come down and rehearse this morning and do the concert for us?
Oh my
I went, I think I said, how much? And they told me what the fee was. So I managed to get, I wasn't planning to sing that day, but I managed to pull myself together and go and do, I think I bought a new washing machine out of it.
Well, it is interesting. I mean, I was hoping to get Nika Burns to talk about the finances of theatre, but of course, because of the pandemic, she's, as you know, just going absolutely crazy trying to get her theatres open because we're all out of work, or you guys are all out of work at the moment. So it's tragic, but it would be perhaps another time to talk about some of the economics of because these things are beasts. I mean, I just before lockdown, Nika invited me to the Dress of 6, which is one set, 6 people on stage. So you think, okay, that's fairly small. And because it was a dress rehearsal, I counted in the stalls 14 production desks and 18 computers. And you just think, these things are beasts now. And all that has to be paid for and has to pay back.
It's unbelievable what they cost. Yeah, I mean, that's why these big shows can't manage unless they're full, because it takes years to get the money back from them.
And we haven't been able to make the government understand that you cannot play Phantom of the Opera or Harry Potter or Frozen on 50% capacity, because it won't even pay the bills, let alone pay back.
They don't get it. And as an artist, your wage bill is a tiny part of the whole thing.
Yes, I presume you didn't make much of the £6 billion profit that Phantom of the Opera has made.
Well, actually, I've made a lot of money out of Phantom because
of the album.
A lot of money from the cast album. Yeah. I mean a lot of money. It sort of set me up because they only ever made a British cast album, and for years and years I got a lot of money in royalties. In fact, during lockdown, I got £1,000 last year, which is not bad after 30-something.
After 30-something years, yeah. Wow. Okay, well now, Rosie, we're going to go live because we've got some live students who want to ask some questions. So our first question is from Anna. Anna used to be a member of the EYT, and she's now studying musical theatre at Solent University in Southampton, which is ironic because I grew up in Southampton. And so it's lovely to have Anna. Welcome. It's good to have you. How's Southampton? Are you there?
Cold.
Cold. Well, it's pretty much cold everywhere. I hope you go to, when it's open, I hope you go to the Mayflower Theatre a lot.
Yeah, it's closed. They cancelled Sticks. And
anyway, welcome. Your question to Rosie.
Yes, so I just have a quick question. So the role of Carlotta is really vocally demanding, as well as the role of Christine. I'm trying to extend the vocal range to go even higher than it already can. Like, what would you recommend is a good training method, like, to go about that?
Singing lessons.
I've only just started being vocally trained because since I was in EYT, I did drama as opposed to music. So I've never been vocally trained before I started here.
Well, I mean, it's really down to your singing teacher to work with you to see what your range. I teach myself, and I always find out what somebody's range is, and then there are various exercises about stretching the voice to see how far you can go with it. So it's down really to working with your teacher for that. It's something you could do yourself, because you might, if you haven't had much training before, you don't want to damage your voice if you're not what we call supporting it properly, or by just thinking, I'll just see if I can reach that note. It doesn't work like that. It's like being an athlete. You have to do proper training.
Rosie, could you just extend that bit? Because I see a lot of this and it worries me a lot. You see people and you can see that the vein here is starting to bulge because they're straining on their voice. And I think they will have no voice left. And I just wonder if you could, without being too technical, just talk a little bit about supporting the voice, because it also applies to speech as well as to singing. But I just think,
yeah, I mean, I teach the way I was taught, which is about using the body, the voice being on the body. So forget about it coming from here. This is just an aperture, but you've got to support it with not just your diaphragm. The diaphragm is the first thing, of course, but the lower ribs, the upper ribs, and making sure the whole voice is supported by the body. If you think about it, if you're just singing from there, it's going to cause strain. But if it's got this support from underneath, plus using the resonances in the back of your head and all that sort of stuff. So that's the most important thing. Breath control. Breath control is the most important thing. Getting the breath right and using all the right muscles for that.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Anna, for that. That was really interesting. So next up, we've got Alexa for Rosie. It's interesting, Rosie. Well, just whilst Alexa comes in, because I've not been singing really for over a year, I'm surprised at how little breath I've got, and I've really got to start practicing again because there's not much.
Well, it's like anything else, you have to keep it going. I mean, I've been practicing, and I'm teaching a bit, but I've also kept the practice going because it's too easy to leave it, and then it becomes really hard work. Yeah, and it's hard when you think, oh, what am I practicing for? And there's nothing. Yeah,
exactly. Anyway, Alexa, welcome again. It's lovely to see you. Your question for Rosie.
It's a bit similar to Anna's, but it was, what kind of vocal training would you recommend specifically for musical theatre?
Well, see, I believe that, how old are you, Alexa?
16.
16. See, I'm a great believer, and a lot of the colleges feel this too, that the basic training should be, I don't know what you call it. I mean, I don't like to use the word classical technique anymore because that sounds a bit old-fashioned, but the basic training you should have is that you have an even tone throughout the whole of your vocal range, from the bottom to the top. And that's in head voice, okay? Especially at your age. You don't want to be touching anything in a belty voice or a chest voice for a few years yet. And a lot of the colleges don't like people to sing in chest voice or belt voice for the first year. So once you've got that, it's a bit like learning ballet, having that as a basic, and then you layer other things on top. So if you have a even tone all the way through your voice, carried properly by the breath and support, then you can learn to do the other things too, which are like twanging, nasal twang, oral twang, belting, all these other things which are needed for certain types of musical. If you do too much of that too soon, because it's very tempting to hear people think, oh, I'll just copy that. You can get into trouble. So that's my advice. That's the sort of bedrock of vocal foundation for me. Once you've got that, then you can add the other things.
I think that's really important, because I think a lot of the modern shows have a lot of belt in them, and you will have heard some of these shows. Wicked would be a great example of a show. I mean, it's a great show, don't get me wrong, but it's a hell of a lot of belt. And when you're young, you haven't got the support to do so much belt. So please do some legitimate stuff using your head voice first, and then, as Rosie says, layer the stuff later as you develop the support. Is that right, Rosie? Yeah,
well, that's the way I teach. That's the way I've always done, and it's worked. And I've had people come to me. In fact, I had somebody come to me who was singing, had to sing Defying Gravity, was auditioning for Wicked, and she couldn't, and she was having trouble with it. And I said, sing it in your head voice. Defying gravity, like that. Imagine that you're an opera singer, and we got her doing it like that, and then we gradually added the twang until it was in a safe place, and she never looked back. But she was trying straight away to go straight in and force it and push it.
It will be very interesting, actually. Next week, we're going to be talking to Kerry, Ellis, who of course has played.
She was fantastic the other night.
She was wonderful. Oh, well, absolutely. But she played that role. So again, it will be interesting to talk about that. So there's another question that's just popped in. Amanda, we'll come to you in just a sec, but it's could you explain the difference, Rosie, briefly, between head voice and chest voice? It's come in as a question. People don't quite understand.
Well, your head voice is your sort of soft, nice, legitimate sound all the way up. Chest voice really is the lower range. From about, I don't know how musical people are, really from about, and maybe E flat D down to the bottom of the voice, down to G, F. And then belt is something different. Belt is a sort of almost like a mixture of the two. If you take your chest voice up too high, you're straight, there'll be too much weight going up. So it's ah, Can you hear the difference? I've changed there.
Yes.
But if I go,
Yeah.
that is, that's more of a twangy. Sorry, I hope you're not blasting everybody's mind. As opposed to going, so there's a difference. There's chest, head, and then there's belt. And the idea is to get a mixed voice. Really, the safest thing is a mixed voice where it sounds like you're belting, but you're not. You've got a mixture of the two.
It's very interesting. And Andrew always says that one of the things about Elaine Page that she could do is that she could put a belt in quite high, which is quite dangerous, but she could do it. And
actually, I've always found, I mean, I think she's great, Elaine, but if you listen back, quite nasal, some of her singing.
It is quite nasal. It is quite nasal.
And there's that danger of getting it too much in the nose, and you need to get it behind the nose and send it from there to sort of the back of the throat. So it's got that nasal twang, but it's got more
overall resonance. Yeah.
To it. That's
guys, if you get the opportunity to a beautiful, Rosie's talked a lot about having the same tone throughout the range of your voice. A very good example, brilliant singer. If you go to YouTube and Google Le Jazz Hot from the musical Victor Victoria, in that, Julie Andrews in one breath goes through 2.5 octaves, and it's quite extraordinary what she does because she had the vocal equipment to do that. And there's virtually no break between her chest voice and her head voice. I mean, it's an extraordinary piece of work. Really is. Right.
A child soprano, of course, wasn't she? She was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, 4 octaves when she was young. 4 octaves.
4?
Yeah.
Really?
Freak voice. Absolute freak voice. 4. Extraordinary.
Very, very
right.
nice. Everybody has 4. Yeah.
Our next question is from Amanda, and she is also in Brussels. So welcome, Amanda. There you go.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry about that.
You're very welcome. And your question for Rosie?
Yes, my question is, what would you say plays the most important role in reaching a big break? And do you have any advice on how to get there?
Getting a big break can be down to all sorts of things. Being in the right place at the right time, somebody falling ill, you taking over. But basically, it's about fitting the picture that the producers or directors want, fitting the bill, being the right person for the job. You can have the most stunning voice, you can be the most wonderful dancer, you can look amazing, you can be a great actor, but there might be something, in your look that isn't right. There's so many, it's so competitive, it's so hard. All I can say to you, in order to get it's just not easy to get your big break. You just have to be totally committed. If you really want it enough, you have to work hard so you leave no stone unturned. So you think, I can't do this any better than I'm doing now. I'm totally prepared. I can sing. I'm singing something that shows me off to my absolute best. Everything's secure. I can dance everybody off the stage. It's about having confidence and self-belief, not so much a big ego, but just having confidence in yourself and working hard. And it's just a matter of sometimes good fortune of getting that way, that far up the ladder. There's no magic remedy, I'm afraid. I can't.
Hard work. Having said that, Rosie, even when you're massively successful, there will be rejection.
All the time.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I've got used to it now. I also, you have to be made of rubber. Oh God, I never had. People assume because I've had a good career behind me that I've I just don't have to audition anymore. I still have to audition. I still get nervous. But I'm made of rubber, and my whole attitude is, it's back to what I've been saying all night. I'm totally well prepared. I go in and I think, I want to come out thinking, I cannot do that any better than I've done it. If they haven't picked me for whatever reason, I might be too fat, too thin, too old, too young, the wrong color, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, whatever reason, it's not through my fault. It's their other circumstances. So that's it, really.
Wise words. Thank you for your question, Amanda. And our next question is from Lucas, and Lucas is coming to us from The Hague. So this is amazing, isn't it? This modern, we've all learnt this since lockdown, but it is extraordinary, isn't it? So Lucas, come on.
Hi, Lucas.
Oh, good evening. Hi. So my question is, what does it feel like going on stage in a major role for the very first time?
Terrifying. It can be very frightening. But the thing is, Lucas, with most of the big shows, before they open, for opening night, you have what they call previews, a series of previews where you do maybe, if you're lucky, a couple of weeks where you get to sort of work the role in. And also during that time, this happens with all the big shows, when they start previewing, you're still rehearsing during the day. So you'll do a preview one night, you'll go in and put changes in all the time. So actually by the opening night, the press night, which is the big night, you should be well prepared enough, and you'll still be scared. It's still very scary because you know you're going to be reviewed. And the answer to it's about what you do about nerves, really, in a way. That's part of your question. The answer to dealing with nerves is to just keep on performing as much as you can until you get used to it. I mean, I still get terribly nervous, but I'm just better at hiding it now. There was a famous singer called Ethel Merman, American Broadway star, who was asked if she was nervous on the opening night of Annie Get Your Gun. And she said, "Why should I be nervous? My frock fits and I know my lines." And if you think, I know what I'm doing, I'm going out there, I'm totally prepared. And it's wrong if you don't get nervous, there's something wrong. You should get that flutter in your stomach. But if you're absolutely prepared and know what you're doing and rehearsed well enough, it should be fine. But yes, of course, it's scary because you think everything can rest on it. And
as we were saying a minute ago, a lot of money, of course. If these shows flop, they take down millions and millions of pounds, of course, not to mention everyone's jobs. You mentioned previews, which is interesting. And Liz last week was talking about the first preview of Love Never Dies, which was, of course, famously catastrophic. I was at a preview of Phantom, and that was a fair old shambles as well. So there were quite a few technical teething problems with Phantom, weren't there?
Oh, terrible. It was particularly the staircase in Masquerade, which never worked. It was embarrassing. I thought we all thought this is never going to get right in time, and then magically on that opening night, it all happened. Although I think the night before the press night of Phantom was a better performance. Princess Diana came, and we had it was a gala, and that performance was amazing. And the next, I don't know, it just all happened that night. I don't know whether she did her magic or whatever, but there was a party afterwards and everything. And the actual press night was far more nerve-wracking. And also the audience, audiences at press night can be quite cold sometimes because they're sitting there saying, come on.
I before lockdown, I was quite often invited to press nights. And I always said to Paul, actually, they're rarely that good. For one thing, they always go up late because you can't get the journalists out of the bar. There's, and I think everyone
people wanting to be seen. The
night I saw the preview I saw of Phantom, the chandelier went up but didn't come back down because it got stuck. So it was a bit fair old shambles, that one was. But there we go. Thank you for your question, Lucas.
I just wanted to finish. I didn't totally say the thing about finish off the rejection thing. I mean, about we're in the rejection business, so you have to keep on trying and try not to take it personally. You have to learn very early on to move on very, very quickly. Just think, well, I didn't get that, move on, and not go, oh, why not? And it should be me, and it's not fair. Life isn't fair. And that's just the name of the game. And if you want to do this as a profession, you just have to get used to it.
I like your phrase, I'm made of rubber. That's bounce back. Because there'll always be another show. Thank you, Lucas. I can't believe this, but we're coming to the end of our time, Rosie. I know. But there's a question that is on my list, and I asked Liz, and I want to ask you the same question, which is, do you read your reviews?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Yeah. And I've always read them because I think you can learn from them. And, because if you have a lot of, if the reviews are mainly bad and you think, well, I obviously was doing something wrong. If you get mainly good reviews and the odd bad review, you think, Well, that's just one person's opinion. I mean, I just think it's interesting to see. I know a lot of actors say, "Oh, I never read reviews." I think it's personally, I like to.
I think it's what is always hard, I find, with reviews is sometimes it's difficult to know whether they just didn't like the show or they didn't like somebody's performance, and they are different things, but it must be quite hard as a performer to separate those two things out in your mind.
Yeah, but you just have to say to yourself, it is one person's opinion. I think the worst thing is when you work your socks off and you don't get mentioned in a review.
That's
that don't even get mentioned. But it is interesting to see what people have to say, particularly about new shows. I mean, I've still got the reviews of Phantom, and they weren't that great, the original
Well, of course, the reviews of Les Mis were terrible.
Yeah, the reviews of Les Mis were terrible. It's about what the public want, isn't it?
Yes. Sadly, we haven't really talked about, because you played Madame Thénardier in Les Mis, didn't you?
I have, yeah.
Which is a gift of a part, of course.
Oh, I've played her twice. Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
Oh, it's just a joy to do.
We could go on talking, and there's so many. And I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions that you submitted. Really brilliant questions, but we only have an hour. I'm enormously grateful, Rosie. Thank you so much for sharing.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. We could go on, but
we could, and we will gossip again. I don't know when the stage party will be. Who knows? This year, next year, sometime, never. But thank you, Rosie Ashe.
Okay, thank you very much.
And good night, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye bye.